I'm Hugh Hewitt, back inside the Beltway at the Relief Factor studio of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Glad to be there. We've got 90% of the studio's problems fixed. Xfinity brought me a new modem yesterday and put that into the studio, and it's up and running, but it requires quite a lot of backup stuff, so not everything's perfect. Bear with us for a couple of days. I can't print anything. Doesn't matter. The news is the news. Only one new poll came out yesterday, some Trafalgar polls. And they're very interesting because they're Michigan. In Michigan, Trump leads Harris by 2 points. Now, that's astonishing because Trump underpolls. And in the Slotkin-Rogers Senate race, and we want Mike Rogers in the Senate. We need Mike Rogers in the Senate. Mike Rogers, Army lieutenant, FBI agent, former head of the House Intel Committee, serious man, center-right guy, very, very good senator. Elise Slotkin, disappointing every Democrat she's met. Slotkin is up by 1 point, allegedly. Now, New York Times says 15 million people have already voted. That includes me. Yesterday, I told you that after the program, I would go and cast my vote for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and I did so. And I also got a chance to vote for Hung Cao. And I wrote most of my new Fox News column about the United States Senate and the various candidates who are running on the Republican side. They have 11 competitive seats. They are running 6 veterans. They are running 2 naturalized citizens, one of whom I'll be with tonight, Bernie Moreno, along with Mike Gallagher in Ohio at the Genoa Christian Church outside of Columbus. If you want to come and get a ticket to that, head over to battlegroundtour.com. We'll be there. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And always a great time being in Columbus, Ohio. And always good to be with Bernie, whether it's virtually or in person. Then I'll come back to the Beltway for the show on Thursday, and I'll be back then to Philadelphia with Dave McCormick and gang, and Mike Gallagher again, Chris DeGaulle, on Thursday night. So on Friday, Dwayne will be in, although I've got the Hillsdale dialogue. I've got a way to figure out to get that pre-recorded and drop it in for you in its regular slot, the last radio hour of the week. The headline today is that, well, there are 2 that matter. The pollsters believe, this is from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal reports, pollsters blew it in 2020. Will they be wrong again in 2024? The answer is almost certainly yes. Why? It's not because they don't want to be right. They all want to be IBD tip. They all want to be tip because tip has the best reputation. That means they get the most clients for everything in the private sector. That means they get everybody calling them up and asking them to do polling work for their firm. You want to be right, but figuring out who's going to turn out is a nightmare, especially in the COVID year. So we really don't know who's going to be right. But I do know that Trump was underpolled in 2016 and underpolled in 2020. So the assumption, could be wrong, is that they won't find his voters again. So when you see that he's up by 2 in Michigan, according to Trafalgar, maybe he's up by 5. You know, he's evenly divided, according to the Arab American Institute, among Arab American voters, 42-41, with Trump ahead by the 1 point, which doesn't mean anything in a poll that far out. I'm just telling you, we can't believe any polls. Get out and vote. 15 million people have done so. In North Carolina, the early voting in North Carolina is evenly split between Republican and Democrat. Evenly split. In Nevada, according to John Ralston, who used to be on the show, but then John got a little bit crazy with Adam Laxalt and just became a left-winger. So I stopped having John on because, I don't mind having left-wingers on. I don't like rude left-wingers, and John became rude. So I said, okay, see you later. But John is on X, and he posted yesterday, Republicans have an 8,000 vote advantage in the early voting in Nevada, and they need a Clark County margin before voting begins on the final day of election season, November 5. Now, the story I want to tell you about, first of all, Israel is pounding Beirut overnight, and they have destroyed the 24 branches of Hezbollah's bank. There's $500 million in gold, by the way, beneath the Beirut hospital. And you can count on the Israelis getting that gold or destroying it because they're not in the business of allowing Hezbollah to be liquid now that they've attacked. And for a year and a week, they've attacked Israel. and now they've attacked the Prime Minister Netanyahu's home and his wife, and they're done with it. They destroyed 70% of Hezbollah's missiles. 2,000 of their senior fighters have been killed. When they go to war, and they have thoroughly penetrated Hezbollah. I think they've thoroughly penetrated Iran. We'll see when they hit Iran. But the big story of the morning is in the Washington Post, and it's co-authored by three fine reporters, one of whom Leanne Caldwell I've worked with, but they miss the story. Headline, Washington Post: Republicans lean into anti-transgender message in closing weeks. Now, Leanne and her colleagues do not pick the headline, but they do write the opening. GOP candidates are attacking transgender rights in swing states as a part of a final pitch to voters. Quote, Donald Trump and other GOP candidates are increasingly targeting transgender people in the election's closing days, invoking them as a boogeyman at rallies and pouring millions into advertising, tying Democrats to transgender rights. Now, this is a choice. It's an editorial choice, and I think it's a bad editorial choice. The choice is, are we going to say what the Republicans are really saying, or are we going to try and shoehorn it into the left-wing narrative? And they went with the left-wing narrative, which is that the GOP is anti-transgender right. I don't often talk about transgender issues because mom and dad, this is early in the program, but mom and dad are usually driving kids to school before they go to work. And I do not want to introduce subjects that the parents don't want to talk about in the car. But this isn't about transgender issues. I have nothing but compassion for youngsters going through gender dysphoria. I don't think it's at all uncommon. I think that social contagion also has marked the last couple of years where it became kind of a thing among young women and young boys to draw attention to themselves by deciding that they were going to be girls or boys. And it's always been there. There have always been a very tiny percentage of people. That's not what the issue is. That's really not. It's not about transgender rights. Not about transgender adults at all. It's about girls and women's sports and girls and women's bathrooms and locker rooms. And mostly it's about girls' sports. There are so few transgendered women who are men who chose to become women, or boys who think of themselves as girls. They're minors, so they really can't make that decision. But they want to compete in girls' sports. Now, occasionally you hear a horror story like Kamala saying that she wants to pay for transgender surgery of men in California prisons, and that's a nutty issue that she adopted in 2019. We should not be doing that. Men who commit crimes go to jail as men. They should stay men. It's not medical treatment that the taxpayer should pay for. Now, the key, though, is sports. We want girls' sports to thrive, and they have. Since Richard Nixon signed Title IX in 1972, girls' sports took off. I like to talk with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and her age cohort about the early attempts to bring sports to girls in the 70s in high school. There weren't many. There was some field hockey. Private girls' schools always had field hockey, but not public schools. They played a little bit of volleyball, and they ran a couple of laps. They did calisthenics, but they weren't playing football, basketball, baseball. They didn't have swimming. They didn't have water polo, none of that stuff. That's all because of Title IX. And colleges did the same thing. We have a women's basketball association. We have Caitlin Clark. We have all these great women athletes at the Olympics because of Title IX. And you know what? Across the country, there are millions and millions of young girls who are playing sports. And their mothers and their fathers and their brothers and their sisters and their coaches and their families and their friends want them to compete to the best that they can, and they want them to excel to the extent that they can. The Flash ran a 5K this week, and the Flash did very well. The Flash is always good, one of my grandsons. But I want my granddaughters, when they compete, and my oldest one, the Scholar, swims. I want her to compete against other girls. I don't want her to compete against boys unless they are having a mixed medley. They used to do that all the time, mixed medleys. And it's not up to kids to decide that they want the medals more than the girls want the medals, and therefore they're going to become a transgender girl. That's the issue. And if you agree with me that we ought to protect girls' sports and women's sports from transgender women and transgender girls and the locker rooms of girls and women, you will vote GOP down the line. Coaches, parents, down the line, from Donald Trump all the way down. And you're going to do it early, like I did. We'll talk about early voting when we come back.